So this is the class guide to WvW Herald build. The build that we are running is a mix of Berserker and Marauders to come to a base crit of near 60%. And the rune that we run is Scholars. If you have trouble staying alive, you can choose to run durability runes instead. That will give you a small boost in sustaining in a fight with the tier 6 bonus giving you 10% health and the extra toughness that comes with it. And on the sword sets, you'll be running Bloodlust and Force Sigil, and the hammer will be Force and Impact. For the build, this will be the build, Devastation trade line, Invocation and Herald accordingly. So some things to note with this build is with this trait, Brutality, when you have quickness and you damage an opponent, you will remove a stack of stability per second as long as you have quickness. Okay, so with that out of the way, we'll go over the weapon skills first. Weapon skills, the main skills on the hammer you want to pay attention to is 2 and 3 and your auto attack. For 2 and 3, it's important to know that with skill 2, if you turn too quickly, you will not cast it properly. You will actually get cancelled out. So you want to kind of want to face a certain cone radius. So if you turn too fast, you see that nothing happens, you don't get damage. So you kind of want to try to play around with it and figure out the threshold. With skill 3, you want to know that as you are in animation, you don't move. You come back to the spot where you cast it. So if your group is on the move and you cast skill 3, you might be away from the group when you come back at the end of your animation. So you kind of want to watch your positioning and decide whether it's the best skill to use in that instance. And why I say your skill 1 is the most important is because that most of your DPS can come out from your skill 1 as long as you are able to target properly, as it's a cleaving or rather a piercing skill, and if you hit all 5 targets, you will literally boost up your DPS by a whole ton. With skill 5 is just an AoE CC, but it's a long cooldown. You can also use it as a blast finisher when we are blasting smokes from Scrapper Gyros. So when you hear Gyros and Blast, you could use this skill to help with the blast. Skill 4, you don't really use it, so we will not go over that. Over to the sword sets. Your skill 5 is a blink into a damage, but it's single target and you only use it if you really need the mobility, as it's hard to get the full value out of it. You need to get the full value out of it, you need to hit a second time, which I'll show. So you will blink forward first, you get a hit, and then you get a second hit. So you generally use it for mobility. Your skill 2 is a burst skill. So it's ideal that you only hit one, so you get more damage, but if you hit multiple, that's fine as well. So it kind of looks like this. You see that you hit about 2k-ish crit, and if I were to hit a single target, for example, you see I hit for 4k crit. With skill 4, it's a AoE cleave, but you get to immobilize, so that's a nice skill to use as well. With skill 3, it's kind of tough because you don't really want to use it all the time, because you will be blinking around multiple targets, but you do not have control of which target you end up at. So it's not the most advisable, and your one skill is just a cleave, so there's not much to go over that. So going over the dwarf skills first. So your most important skills, actually all skills are important here. The dwarf roads, whenever you are in dwarf or whenever you're swapping into dwarf, you want to at least use roads twice before you swap off to herald to get a relatively the most value out of dwarf. With dwarf, there is 8 sections that drop down. Each section can hit up to 5 targets, and theoretically you can hit up to 40 targets, so you can get a lot of damage out of this. You can use it defensively or offensively. Offensively, use it to damage enemies, or defensively to give your squad stability. Your skill is a AoE pulsing damaging skill that is nice to use when you are just cleaving or you're in a melee scenario. So this is what it looks like. But the important thing about this is that it gives you a damage reduction, a personal damage reduction of 13% incoming power damage, 20%, 20% incoming and 20% condi damage reduction. And it gives you a slight damage increase, which is nice. Your skill, your chain skill is a very long taunt, so it's nice to catch people who are in who's at the tail. They are less likely to have stability, so it's more likely for you to catch them. And then your Dwarf Elite, which is the biggest one, because it gives up to 5 allies, including yourself, 50% damage reduction. So if you actually do the math, if you were to take damage reduction food, that's 10%, and when you have protection, that's 33%. So that's 43% so far. And if let's say you have the Vengeful Hammers on, that's 20%, and if you have your elite skill on, that's over 100%. So this is really important to use, especially in a melee scenario, and it's a hotspot most likely to just help your team get extra sustainability. Your heal skill is your only Condi cleanse skill on this build, so use it wisely. Your F2, you only use your F2 when you're in Dwarf Code, as it grants stability when you cast it. So you don't really want to stay in this. You kind of want to just double tap it and just get over it so that you can regenerate your energy quicker. So that goes over your Dwarf. On the Herald, your upkeep skills, you want to, as often as you can, keep the Facet of Darkness up, Facet of Strength up for maximum Fury uptime and might. So the Fury on the Herald build is interesting because with the Rolling Mist trait, it doubles the effectiveness of the Fury. So base Fury gives 20% crit. With Rolling Mist, it gives your Fury 40%, but it is personal, not to your team. So what happens is that we will get near 100% crit, which is ideal. Okay, so I will not go over the heal skill. You should know what the heal skill does by now or how it works. But I'll go over the more important one, which is your Burst of Strength, your Facet of Elements, which turns into Elemental Blast, and the Elite Facet of Chaos. So I'll go over the first one with the active on the Elite. It's a CC that grants super speed. It's a nice knockback. So it's up to you whether you want to choose to keep the passive on. It takes a lot of energy, but the protection uptime is nice. The important ones to pay attention to here is your Elemental Blast and your Burst of Strength. Elemental Blast is basically a pulsing AoE damage skill, and with your Burst of Strength, this is the biggest one on the Herald line. You want to use Burst of Strength while you're in melee range. It's only 300 range, so you want to make sure you are familiar with your ranges. So this is approximately 300 range, so when you cast it, you get your Burst of Strength. And this will give you a damage boost increase, and that's when you kind of want to go ham with all your damage skills. So usually you want to combo Burst of Strength with Elemental Blast. Okay, so with playing Herald, it's very important to know your range thresholds, because you have different skills with different ranges. Most importantly, it's the hammer with most of your skills being 1200 range, so 1200 range is approximately there. And with your Elemental Blast, it's a 600 range, which is half of your hammer skills. Okay, yeah. So that would about cover the Herald.